Hey guys, welcome to Bring Through Addiction. My name is Dr. Rob Kelly, the Addiction Doctor. Good to be with you today, guys. Got some news, a couple of not so great news, but our friend, my co-host, of course, can't be here today. Kristen has had death in the family, and we're all thinking of her and praying for her. So she's actually off today, but she'll be back next week as usual. Looking for my first guest who hasn't turned up yet. We got Ken Seeley on the show about 20 after. In about 25 minutes time or something like that. So if you're sat at home now watching the show and want to come on for 20 minutes or 15 minutes, just text Janet. She'll give you the link. You can come on and speak to me live on air. We're live on Facebook and we're live on YouTube. And yeah, it'll be good to have you for a few minutes. But in the interim period, welcome to the show. It's good to see you guys. Good to hear your comments as always. I hope you've had a fantastic week. So my week, let me think what my week has been like. It's been pretty normal actually. Just working and chilling out. We got a great backyard, just chilling out the back there. And it's awesome. I have an amazing life today. And the reason I have an amazing life today is because that I've done my work. And alcoholism is no longer a problem, although the traits of alcoholism is. Let me explain that. The alcohol is no longer a problem. So it means that I don't crave alcohol and I don't want alcohol. The body doesn't crave because there's no alcohol in there. So you can't crave for anything that's not already in your body. And because of the work I've done on myself with the trauma and everything, it means I can live a free life, and so can you. You can actually live that free life that we always talk about, especially in meetings, especially in AA meetings and, you know, stuff like that. Because alcoholics, if you're sat at home thinking that you're an alcoholic, go to a meeting, call a friend, start dialogue with somebody. Because that's why my story started. My story started at the age of 9. When I was on stage with the musical family, and then obviously started drinking, and then my life kind of got better. It was better with somebody that was drinking. You know, if I can find a buddy that was drinking, great. If I was drinking, it was great. Worked for me for a long, long time. And as time goes on, as most of you will know, listen to this show, it gets worse. It never gets any better. So these hangovers got worse. The consequences got worse. And it's amazing how alcoholism takes you without you knowing. So they reckon, and I agree with, that most people who are drinking, who are alcoholically drinking, don't realize they have a problem. Because we're always the last to know, of course. And that was the same with me. So just briefly, my life story was, you know, started drinking at 9, like I said, all through school, college, still drinking. And then I met my first wife, and we thought we'd get married, because I honestly thought that when I got married that my drinking would curb. Now, I never had a problem, never thought I had a problem until I was homeless. And then it was a year after that. So this problem that I had didn't exist. But I know I was drinking a lot. I'm drinking at parties and stuff. And, you know, most days that turned into every day in the end. So it was just, I don't know, it was just like a shock to me. I remember going to the doctors once and asking the doctor, do you think I was an alcoholic? And he said, yeah, I think you are. You're drinking too much. Now, God bless him. That's all he knew at the day of saying that. What he was really trying to say and didn't know then was alcoholism is the only self-diagnosed illness in the world. Nobody else can diagnose you as alcoholic. 10 DUIs do not make you an alcoholic, my friend. Or 10 warnings from the doctors, or 10 arrests, whatever it may be, because of alcohol. It doesn't make you an alcoholic. It means possibly you abuse alcohol. My first indicator when I look at anybody is this alcoholism in the family. Now, I always say this, and it's controversial, but it's brain science true, that alcoholics are born like this. Drug addicts are made, which means that the first drink an alcoholic takes is doomed from day one. Whereas drug addicts, who, you know, you can take enough drugs to become addicted to drugs. You can't drink enough alcohol to become an alcoholic. You're either born this way with the predisposition, or that you abuse alcohol. I mean, you just can't drink yourself to becoming an alcoholic. It's an impossibility. See, it's not the alcohol. Most people think it's the alcohol. It's not the alcohol. If you remember what I said in the previous show, is the alcohol is the symptom. So it's a bit like the spots on my chicken pox. You know, oh, Rob, I can see you got chicken pox. How? I can see the spots all over you. No, actually, that's a symptom. The actual disease is inside. I have a viral infection that could kill me as an adult. It's the same thing with alcoholism. What we see is the bottle. We don't see the internal stuff that's going on. Alcoholism is a brain defect or a brain damage or a brain injury. We like to call it injury because you can recover from it. So when I take alcohol into my body, I act differently to anybody else, and it sets off this allergy to alcohol. It means that my head craves more and more every time I drink. So if me and you went out drinking, and you was a normie, as we say, and we both had a glass of wine or 2 glasses of wine or whatever it may be, then you would go home next day and get ready for work. I would be continuing that night. And I'd book myself into a hotel that had room service or minibar. I would drink all night. The next morning when you're traveling to work in your car, I'm trying to find somebody to take me to the nearest pub or bar that would serve me alcohol at 7 a.m. And that will continue until I finally pass out, taken to hospital. Well, they'll probably keep me on a 24, 36, 48 hold in a psych ward. I'll come out of that and my family will stick me in treatment. That's my 1 glass of wine with you. And that's the difference. Now, there are abusers of alcohol. You know, people who drink every day, they're crazy when they drink. They shouldn't be drinking that much. But given a sufficient reason, them guys can stop. You know, they really can stop or moderate even. I'm only going to drink Friday and Saturday. If the wife says, hey, listen, so if you go out another day with your friends drinking, I'm going to leave you. You can only go out 2 nights. Well, you can probably do that. I can't. You know, I remember my first wife begging and begging and begging me not to go to the liquor store or off license, begging me to go. But you see, my internal dialogue and the way my brain works, I didn't have any choice. You see, what happens with the brain is part of the brain called the hypothalamus, which tells normal people, by the way, to eat food and drink water. It's a fight or flight survival part of the brain. Do you know what it tells me when I take my first drink? It tells me to drink alcohol. And that's why alcoholics can go days, if we're not weeks, without drinking water or eating food, because our brain's telling us that we need alcohol. So when I'm going through the first bottle of vodka, my head's saying, where can I get the second one from? All the time. You see, when I go to the liquor store to buy my first bottle, I don't really want this to carry on. In fact, I'm going to hate myself in 20 seconds when I open the top. So I only buy 1. I don't buy 10. When I get back and halfway through it, I'm thinking, oh my God, I got to go back. It's madness. And then what happens is I drive while drunk, go into the liquor store to get the alcohol. When I get in the car, I can't wait till I get home. So I'm drinking again in the car, and then all hell breaks loose. And that's how my first marriage went to bust, is because of my drinking. Nothing else. God bless that woman and my kids and everything, the stuff that I put them through. But it wasn't their fault. It was my fault. And if you're sat at home in a crappy marriage and you're drinking because of your wife, get a new fucking wife. You know, if your boss is being mean to you and you think you get a new boss, these are the things we can do. We have freedom in America. You can do anything you want to do within the law. If you want a new job, get one. If you want a new wife, get one. But stop drinking because of that, because this is an internal dialogue that's going on with the predisposition disease or redeveloped brain or remap brain, whichever way you look at it. So my brain is telling me to drink all the time. So the only way around that we know of yet through science, although we're still working on it, is what was called by the AA Big Book a psychic change. So when I mention psychic, most people get the tarot cards out and they want to read my future. No, psychic of the old days, psychology, psychiatry, psychic of the mind change. A psychic change is a change of mind. Unless a change in neural pathways happen, then you're always going to relapse. Let me say that again. If the change of self-sabotage in neural pathways doesn't change to healthy neural pathways thinking-wise, then you are going to relapse. Unless you're not the real deal. And I hope you're not the real deal. Then you get to choose whether you drink the second drink or not. I don't have that luxury. So do I live a miserable life? Relapse after relapse after relapse? Well, I used to. There's no doubt about that. I used to do that. It'll be better next time. You know, I'll just have this one drink. My one drink is never one drink, and my one drink never lasts for a day. It always lasts for a week, if not a month. I woke up in Spain once on a bender. I started around the corner from my house in a pub. 4 or 5 days later, 6 days, I'm in Spain, in a hotel in Spain. It was the craziest thing. I went to the credit card reception to pay my bill because I'd been there for a few days and run up a huge bill. And when I swiped it, all failed. My wife and my dad had canceled all my credit cards. So they paid for my flight home. That was a huge lesson for me because I don't remember any of that. And I don't remember a lot of stuff I did when I was in blackout. So I had a question last week, and the question was, what's a blackout, Rob? It's when you're unconscious. No, it's not. A blackout is when the mind is still active, but part of it is saturated with the alcohol that you're drinking, and your body also carries on. The central nervous system isn't dead yet. So you can go around your day sometimes, and for the untrained eye, you can look normal and act normal, but you're actually in a blackout. And most of it, we don't know this for a fact, but we either don't want to remember it or we can't remember it, because everything the brain sees, everything the eyes see that goes into the brain is stored in the subconscious brain. And what happens over years is some of that stuff with therapy or brain spotting will come out. And then you'll see what's going on from your past that you've never known before, because that's the stuff that keeps us sick. Of course, you got to go, if you're a 12-step guy, you got to go through the 12 steps, got to do all your proper inventory, and then you've got to do your amends and your resentments and the grosser handicaps, got to do all that, and that will free you from bondage of self, as they say. That's not my saying, it's the AA saying, which I love. I teach the big book every Saturday, and I love teaching that because of all the schools and universities that I've been to and studying, especially since coming to America, of the alcoholic stroke addicted brain, in all the pieces I've read. And I studied Carl Jung, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, not the fellowship, the meetings, but the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is the most fascinating read pertaining to the recovery of said people. It's as simple as that. It's phenomenal. They're years before their time when it talks about recovering. So I always say to other people that I'm a recovered alcoholic. And in some meetings, which I've stopped going to, we just go to our meetings. In some meetings, people will smile or, say some words behind your back because you can never be recovered. That's not the truth. In fact, if you're a big book guy, open the page where it says Alcoholics Anonymous, large black letters, and then look underneath. You'll find a surprise there for you of how many hundreds and thousands and now millions of women have recovered from alcoholism. But let me explain the difference. Recovered is to gain one's health and state of mind back. Well, if alcoholism is insane with the allergy, well, that recovered is getting over that, but there's no cure. It's a bit like food poisoning. I went to the doctor's once. I had food poisoning, and I was so sick. And he said to me, I didn't know what's going on. I said, Doc, you got to help me. And he said, you got food poisoning, Rob. I said, what do I do? Is there a cure for food poisoning? And he said, no. But let me give you a few simple steps to make sure that you don't get food poisoning again. And he did. He went through these, never reheat frozen stuff after you've once heated it once. Watch the dates, the labels and stuff like that on the food. Never had food poisoning since. And it's kind of the same with the program. Now, if you're a non-AA guy, good therapy is the way to go. Now, you have to be careful out there because not every person is a good therapist. I've met some bad ones in my time. And a lot of people, God bless them, are working out of 60s and 70s textbooks. That's what's being taught at the moment to new counselors. So counseling as a whole, amazing. When you talk about alcoholism and addictive counseling, completely different. And one of the things I find that people say to me all the time and why we connect so good about the disease is I've been through it and I've done that. And I'm also educated and allow to go on and teach and practice the way I do. So I see a therapist. The first thing I ask them is, are you an alcoholic or drug addict? And if they say no, then I don't touch them. And that's all the fact my wife gets on and does that. Janet, all of you know Janet, gets on and does that before, because unless you've walked in my shoes, how the hell can you understand my disease? How can you understand what I'm going through? You see, alcoholism, not only the first and only self-diagnosed illness, but it's also the most misunderstood illness. You ask anybody, what's an alcoholic? It's somebody who drinks too much alcohol. That's the reply they'll give you. It's somebody that abuses alcohol, is to drink too much, they go on benders. That's not true. An alcoholic is a very sick person regarding the brain and the body, the central nervous system, which gets sick. So you have to take both into consideration when we're talking about the alcoholic. And one of the most ambitious things I've ever done is to try and change the mind of the public about that. You see, there's a difference between the Friday night alcoholic who's drunk and the Friday night abuser of alcohol who's drunk. One needs to be locked up and the other needs to be taken to hospital or treatment. That's the difference. And I've spoken to many police forces around the country who have agreed to this and look and find out and ask questions, because, this is a disease once it gets a grip that you have no choice over. My dad used to say, can you not do it just for your kids? No, I couldn't do it for my kids. Otherwise, I'd have done it. I'd have done it years ago for my children. I couldn't do it. When my children went with my wife, it was the most devastating day of my life. A devastating day of my life. Did it stop me drinking? No, it didn't stop me drinking. I carried on drinking. And that's just the way it is with me. Once I start, I cannot stop. I set off this allergy and a mental obsession brings it in, and there's just no stop. In actual fact, it's virtually impossible for me to stop once I've started, unless I go into hospital or get arrested or into a psych ward. They are my only three options towards the end. So disease, we've got to look at the name disease. And the reason why it's called a disease, it's a biochemical reaction. I'm actually not allergic to the alcohol. I'm actually allergic to the ethanol in alcohol. Not many people know that. So I've got to be careful around alcohol. I've got to be careful I never intake alcohol whatsoever into my body. Otherwise, my body will get sick and my mind will set off that compulsion that I've got to have more and more and more and more. It's crazy because there's no other disease like this. You see, if I had cancer, God forbid, I'd be sat at home and all you guys would be coming around to see me and bringing me flowers and chocolates and all that stuff and feeling sorry for me. When you have alcoholism, nobody does that. My family never said, hey, not to worry, we're going to look after you. They never said that. I went to treatment on my own when I was married a couple of times. Didn't work. Just didn't work. So we have to keep trying and we have to keep learning about, you know, once I was upstairs when I was living with my parents, I think after my first marriage, and they wouldn't, well, they tried not to drink in front of me. And I said, that's ridiculous. You can drink in front of me. But one day, my dad, who was a very kind of quiet man, could never really have a conversation with him. He used to drive to work and back, 40 minutes there, 40 minutes back, never speak. That kind of person, proud father, very good father. And I come downstairs once and I open the door to the living room and he scrambled from the back of the sofa. So I'm like, I know what he's done. He's been drinking and he's hide the drink. He doesn't want me to see it. So when he goes back upstairs, I find out, I look behind the counter and it was a book on alcoholism. And it really broke my heart at the time because I knew what they were going through. Okay, well, Jason's just arrived, but I think I've got Ken as well just arriving. So let's bring Jason in for a second. And we'll be right back after this with Jason LaChance, guys. Stick around. We'll be right back after this. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. My name is Dr. Rob Kelly, the addiction doctor, along with Jason LaChance today. Jason, where were you? We're looking for you at 12.
Oh, I got 10. I was told 10:30. Courtney gave me 10:30.
Yeah, Courtney strikes again. Miss Courtney.
I apologize.
Oh, that's no problems.
That's the time I had gotten.
I've actually got another person coming on, Ken Seeley. So let's chat. Let's start talking and see what happens. And what we'll do is we'll rebook you on again if that's okay, Jay.
Sure, no problem.
I know you've got an amazing story. So introduce yourself to everybody and tell them what you're about.
Hi, Jason LaChance, alcoholic. And of course, Dr. Rob and I met from the podcast that I do. And I'm incredibly passionate
podcast, by the way.
Thank you. Podcast. Yeah. Still one of our favorites. I was going to pop on and if you ask me how I was, living the dream, as one of my favorite people would say.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So going back, Jason, did you suffer from alcoholism and addiction or depression or anything like that as a child?
Depression for sure. It's a big part of my childhood. I think we've talked a little bit. My father was an addict. He suffered from some similar traumas to myself. He had a lot of sexual trauma, unfortunately, in his youth. Very fractured home with his parents, and I felt a lot of that as a child, being the youngest of two. Oddly, you know, I was one of those kids that didn't fit in. Always a little bit, I guess, unusual. But you know, now as an adult, I embrace it. I just live as who I am and like who I am. But I oddly didn't fall to substances because once I knew what my dad's disease was, which wasn't, I think a lot of it stems from that sexual trauma. As you know, post our conversation, I've done a lot more reading and wish I could come stay with you for 2 months to learn just a fraction of what you've forgotten.
There's a door up here. It's on a bedroom. It's got Jason LaChance's name on.
Well, all right. We'll have to take you up on that. But being exposed to sexual trauma myself at an early age, being molested, and then early exposure to pornography as well. I realized that was a lot of my insecurities when it came socially, especially when it came to girls and stuff like that. But alcohol didn't really play a role for me until about my mid-20s. Eventually just, you know, working in radio, being around rock stars, and then you get invited to have a beer with one of your favorite bands or whatever. And then being in a traumatic relationship with my kid's mom, very codependent, very abusive mentally and emotionally, you know, both of us coming from trauma. And that's when it really took off.
Yeah, that trauma will kill you, man. I mean, you look back in your life, everybody has trauma, by the way, who suffers with any kind of addiction. You all have trauma. Don't think you don't. Well, I can't think of any, chat. Yeah, you do. And the way it'll come out is when you're going through your teens and early 20s is when you pick that wrong person, or especially women. I can't believe I picked this guy. He's drunk. He's hitting me just like my dad. There's a reason for that. It's called the past trauma that you went through that subconsciously you kept in your mind. So we attract what we think we are worth. It's absolutely unbelievable. So Jay, give me your worst trauma and your best day to date.
Ooh, I think the worst trauma that I recollect was being about 5 years old and my dad saying, "Son, come on over here." And I don't remember if it was a Playboy or a Penthouse or whatever it was, and showing me very graphic things. That memory still really sticks with me. As I recollect, timeline wise, that is my earliest memory. And that's a pretty unfortunate thing to have sitting up there in the dome. And I think that carried me through to a lot of other things. You know, there was, that's the starter. I definitely had like I said, a very tumultuous marriage. Fortunately, we get along great now and co-parent, but there was violence in the home. And as you mentioned, I didn't come from violence, but unfortunately their mom did. And so I had never been subjected to that. So that was a very difficult thing to understand and process now through sobriety. You know, it's detrimental.
So was your alcohol days, did they get out of hand, or was it always manageable for you?
You know, and what is normal drinking, right? I would think I was probably like any other college student. I wasn't a binge drinker. You know, got drunk, you know, a few times, and the puking and things like that you think is normal because you're seeing it in your environment, you know, but it wasn't frequent. It really wasn't until the relationship with my kid's mom that I think it really started to perpetuate. Was a late bloomer very much in life. I think my brain maybe formed a little bit later than other people's do. You know, I know you talk about that formation and that really that maturation within our brain and where that trauma. And I think I just didn't find that thing. I was pretty good in relationships. They came to an end because they ran out. But once I found that one that was that crazy rush, I think my greatest addiction, really looking back, was relationships and looking for identity through them. Yeah,
definitely. The mirroring part of our brain is the culprit most of the times with trauma, because we see this as a child. We see, I don't know, dad beating up mom or coming home drunk every night. And what happens with the child as it grows is that becomes the norm. So most human beings want to get on with most human beings. And the mirroring part of the brain will attract what we think we're worth. So if you're used to seeing that, if the mirroring part of the brain is used to seeing violence, then what happens in the subconscious brain is it will store that. Now, when you meet this guy or girl of your dreams, especially the guys with the women, they get into that abusive relationship. It's that mirroring part of the brain that's connected. That's exactly what it is. So when they go into that relationship, first of all, they go, yeah, I recognize this. This is pretty cool. And they get into that horrible relationship, and it ends, of course, in all sorts of terrible endings. But we've got to be really careful with the brain, because anything that you do going into your teens or early 20s that you think is weird, like, I don't know why I like this or do that or why I hit that person in the face, goes back to the childhood trauma. There's always childhood trauma, always trauma there. And if you don't go back and sort the trauma out, it will sort you out. You know, it's like if you see a deer, you ever see a deer getting hit? I think I mentioned this to my last patient. You ever see a deer getting hit but doesn't die? Yeah. What will happen is it'll stay on the ground for a few seconds. Then it'll stand up and it will shake violently for about 5 seconds. That shaking violently is the deer getting rid of that trauma. It's amazing. But as human beings, we don't do that. We stuff it down. The body keeps score all the time. And all the memories and trauma are stored in the subconscious brain. And it only takes that mirroring part to bring something out in you. And especially if you're born with the predisposition, which means my brain is remapped. And when I'm exposed to alcohol, all bets are off. Age of 9, boom, you're done, Rob. It will always end in tragedy. It's amazing. Yeah. Jason, same. I'm sorry for the time mix-up. I'm sorry that you're late. Let's try and get you in next week. I got my next guest lined up, and we will have fun. Let's get you on for about 45 minutes, and we'll have fun. Sound good?
Sounds great, Doc. Sorry about the mix-up there with that, but always a pleasure. You know I love you, and I'm gonna tune in over on Facebook now and watch because I'm excited for whom you're talking to.
Excellent, great stuff, guys. Ken Seeley's on the show. You all know Ken Seeley. Such a great guy. Now, me and Ken have never actually met, but every time we met, we get on like a house on fire. So I don't know. Maybe one day we have to fly over there to see him. I don't know. This is Breaking Through Addiction, guys. My name's Dr. Rob, the Addiction Doctor, and we'll be right back after this. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. This is Breaking Through Addiction. I'm Dr. Rob Kelly, the Addiction Doctor. Bad news is that Kristen can't be here. She had a death in the family. God bless her. We've been speaking through the night, but she'll be back with us next week as usual. Ken Seeley's on the show. Ken, how you doing? I think you're on mute, Ken.
There you go. I was on mute. Sorry about that. Hey, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you? What are you up to? Tell me where you are now.
I'm out living in the life in Hawaii.
Oh man, now I definitely have to come and see you.
It's heaven out here. We just love it.
Are you still in the industry, or are you just sitting back and letting things carry on without you being there, or are you completely out?
No, I'm still working hard. There was a big West Coast symposium out in Palm Springs this past week, so I was out doing that and meeting a lot of our colleagues, and I just did an intervention for the show the week before that out in Orange County. And after 3 weeks of a lot of work, I'm back here. So I'm excited to be back home. Nice.
And just relaxing there. Nothing else, just chilling out. Is it sunny there? I take it?
Oh, it's always sunny. It's all year round. It's between 80 to 85 and 70 the lowest.
Nice. So let's get in your past a little bit, Ken. Let's talk about first of all any alcoholism or addiction there that the listeners and viewers want to hear about. Let's talk about the trauma. What kind of trauma did you go through as a child?
Well, I just love what you just said about the deer getting hit, right? And it's all about the trauma. And it's so interesting. I've been doing this show for 16 years.
Wow.
And I remember years ago, the show would always say, the producers and the people that work on the show, because they did their research, that addiction is related to trauma. And I was like, you guys are crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. I was like, I had a really good upbringing. My dad was a fireman. My mom stayed home until I was in junior or high school. And, I was never physically abused, mentally abused, never raped, anything. And when they try to identify it as trauma, I was like, that it just doesn't make sense to me. You don't know what you're talking about. And then it took me years in recovery myself from crystal meth and addiction to realize that it's the bullying, the trauma of walking out of my front door and always being scared to death that today's the day I'm going to die.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's what people miss when we're talking about addiction. One of the reasons I came into the industry once again after so many years out was I always thought there was something missing. So 15 years ago, we came back and we looked and we studied the brain and we studied the neural pathways and the hypothalamus, which has a big part to play in alcoholism and addiction. I don't know where people know that, which we'll get into later. But yeah, it's the trauma. People say all the time, Ken, what's the gateway drug? And I say, it's trauma. It's not marijuana, it's trauma. We've got to look at the trauma because it's killing you because we store all that stuff up. So talk to me about you. Oh, by the way, 16 years ago, I used to watch you on Intervention. And I have to say, and I hate saying this, but you haven't aged a day. What the hell is going on?
With what?
You haven't aged one day. You're still not the same as 16 years ago. Are you kidding me? What's going on there?
No, that's not true. If we have a picture of me then and a picture of me now, you can see the difference. People say, "Oh my God, you were so young then. Where'd that happen?"
Awesome. I almost got on the show, not as somebody realized, as one of the interventionists. I had a quick audition, and then they called me back, and I've not made. There was 2 of us left, and the other one kind of stepped in, and I didn't. So I've never watched Intervention since. I'm joking. I have watched it since. Talk to me about your meth. I can't believe that you used to do meth, Ken. You just look like a stand-up, normal, professional person, TV star. You know, and tell me about your meth days. Let's get into it here.
Yeah, no, I mean, it used to be, you know, cocaine, stimulants. I mean, when I love the way you put it. You know, the trauma is the gateway, right? The trauma is the gateway, because I was petrified to walk out my front door every single day growing up, you know, from the age of 4 until the age of 13, 14. And the reason why I wasn't so petrified at 13 or 14, I started alcohol, you know, and then 15, I started drugs. And 16, you know, at 16 years old, you were allowed to be in bars at 18 years old at that time. You know, I was born in 62. So the legal age to drink was 18. And I changed the 2 to a 0 on my license. And at 16, I was going to bars.
Nice.
So,
which was worse for you, Ken, alcohol or crack?
Well, the alcohol, you know, worked for a while, and then, you know, and then after I was sober, you know, or after I was using alcohol, then it switched to Black Beauties. I don't know if you remember those back in the day. You know, Yellow Jackets. You know, those type of uppers were, you know, really popular back in the late 70s. So I was doing a lot of that, and then I got into mushrooms, acid, mescaline, all of those things in high school. And just, you know, by the time I was 18 years old, I was addicted to all of them. And I went into the Air Force, and they don't really like those kind of things, if you didn't know. they don't really approve drug abuse.
Yeah, how about no? We're going to pass on that one.
Just say no back in the day, right? And they didn't really like that idea. And so I was discharged from the Air Force with an honorable discharge after 1.5 years. And, you know, they sent me to my first AA meeting, but that was a bunch of old people there, and I was only 19. Yeah. And even though I'm full-blown addiction, because like you said, of that early childhood trauma, if I would have been able to work through that early childhood trauma, I wouldn't have needed to feel like I needed to numb out constantly.
Yeah.
And then right after that, you know, it was, you know, I moved to New York City. I did a lot of drugs there, got involved with cocaine and ecstasy at that time. Then I moved to Los Angeles, and then the cocaine turned into crystal meth. So from like 1985 to 1989, I was doing crystal meth on a regular basis, pretty much on a daily basis towards the last 2 years.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. Give me the worst trauma you've been through as a child, and give me your worst day using.
And the worst day using. Okay, the worst trauma, I think, you know, and this, as I learned, and now I'm, you know, I got trained by Judy Crane to be a trauma professional to help people get through it. And while I was going through my training, you know, I learned a lot about trauma, and that my trauma was not a rape. You know, it wasn't something that, an incident that happened. And it was explained to me more of like our military going on the front lines of a war every day, watching their friends get blown up and not knowing if tomorrow is the day that they're going to get blown up, or today is going to be their day. And so that's what that felt like from 4 years old to 13 years old, constantly wondering, is today the day I'm going to get blown up? And one of the biggest traumas was like, I finally felt like I had a friend, and this guy that was really popular said, hey, you know, you want to go hang out? And I said, sure. And so I went into the gym, and I, you know, go into the gym where, you know, he had 2 other guys there, and they beat the crap out of me. You know, just, you know, I I was always bullied. I was always made fun of. I was very effeminate back when I was young. Instead of walking, I skipped pretty much. Little kids don't know, but the other kids know that there's something not right. So they make fun of you. Wow.
Yeah, there's a big saying that I'm always into, or explanation with, especially with the wives, is that if the alcoholic's the father, the wife, the brain doesn't know the difference between war in Afghanistan and war inside an alcoholic house. We're always walking around on eggshells. You never know when it's going to explode. You never know when you're going to die. And it might sound horrendous, but until you've been in a house with an alcoholic partner, you will never know what I'm talking about, because it literally is. And we've just made a policy about 6 months ago that we will not take on the patient only. We have to take on the spouse. And if they're not willing to do that, then we send them away. Because we're not willing to do it.
I'm glad.
Yeah, because if you don't treat the family, then it's a bit like, if you pick somebody out, let's say there's a house over here where the alcoholic is, and let's say that house speaks German. So we take our guy out, we bring him to us. Now, recovery has its own name and its own language. So we teach him Japanese. And when we leave him, he's fluent, but then we're going to stick him back into a German house. What's going to happen? He's going to start speaking German again. And the whole thing starts all over again. So unless we teach the house to speak Japanese when he goes back, then everything else runs smoothly. And I think it's really important that we understand that especially the trauma. And it's weird how you just said that I never got raped, never got beaten, or not beaten. I never got anything crazy like a car crash or an airplane crash. But it doesn't have to be that crazy, does it, Ken?
No, not at all. And I love what you just said, because, I just had a client leave yesterday to our treatment center. And the wife called me and she's petrified. She's been walking on eggshells for 20 years. She's petrified. But we're like you. We don't take a client that we don't take the family with us. If the family ain't coming to treatment with them, then we don't take them, because, like you said, I explained it the same way. We should be really working together, because I say the same thing. You teach them another language and then they go back playing the old language. Yes. If I didn't help this mother this wife at the same time, then she wouldn't know what to do. She wouldn't have known to call me. She wouldn't have known that she has to be giving a little too. She's not expecting him to change all the way and her not changing at all. And it's a win-win to get to a win-win. It's got to be a balance.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I think that's where we've seen people like me and you advance in this field, and the percentages get higher. Our percentage is about 97%, but we only do telehealth. We're an aftercare telehealth company, because we just try to scale down when we come to San Antonio, but it's blown up again. But we do nothing but telehealth, so we can work with more people. But it's interesting, because that's where we found, the kind of slip or the black spot is when they come out of treatment centers and go back home. What next? Therapists once a week? No, we do a program that every single day for 90 days to get them back into. So they go to your place to get really well, and they come to us, and then we prep him for life. We'll get that job. We'll build him that website. We'll, go around meetings with a wife, and then we set them off. And I think that's the future. I really do, because look at it. Some years ago, it was just terrible, and the industry itself got a terrible name. But no, I'm really glad that people like you are around, Ken, because the real deal who continues to help people. I mean, how many people you help? Must be millions over the years, especially the TV thing. Must be absolutely weird, and to see yourself like that. Have you ever stopped in your life? And I know that I ask this a lot, and people are kind of amazed. You ever stop in your life, Ken, and realize how good you've done?
No, I always feel like that person that was I still have my trauma responses where I feel like I'm not doing enough. I feel like I have to prove myself. I have to do better. I have to, and it works for me in a way where, it keeps me above board and ethical, because I won't even go in the gray. Because if I go in the gray, then that's where I get beat up.
Yeah,
that's where I get attacked. So I look at the trauma as a positive now instead of a negative, because I learned so much from that trauma, and it's not holding me back anymore, but it's given me the rocket fuel to do the right things.
So what made you become an interventionist? I know that Judy introduced you, but how did you meet Judy?
I came into the field. I had 10 years sober, and and somebody said, you want to answer phones at my treatment center to get people in? You're really solid in your recovery. And, I think talking on the phones and telling people what you did, how you got sober would really be beneficial. And then the people that were calling, in 1999, 2000, they were like, well, how do I get my wife in? How do I get my kids in? And I was like, and back then I think it was more, for me anyway, it was more of a 12-step call. And I kind of said I could talk them into going. I love my life in recovery, and I would fly out there and I would talk to them. And as I learned about it, I learned that this is more of a career and, and a skill set by learning how to motivate the person to get them into recovery instead of just a 12-step call, like finding what motivates them. So I took a bunch of courses. I got certified. I, went back to school for it. And then I learned that, to become a certified interventionist and a case manager. And I love that you said, it's really not about the 30, 60, 90 days of treatment. Because when I got sober in 1989, we had a 3 to 7% success rate. Yep. And here we are in 2021, and 30 days is still a 3 to 7% success rate.
Yep.
So the missing link is what you're doing, because the doctor diversion programs, they have an 80 to 85% success rate, and they follow them for 5 years. So what you're doing is giving them the tools for what real recovery looks like after treatment.
Yeah, and we track them for the next 5 years, and then we report back to the treatment center that sent the patient, and we give them statistics. So when people come, they can actually advertise as having a 70% success rate or 80% because of the aftercare. I definitely think it's the future. Tell me how you got into the program intervention.
Well, then I was doing interventions for 4 years. I got certified. I was doing them for 4 years, and here's this kid that at 4 years old, I remember even in high school, the locker, the shake of a locker, would scare the crap out of me. Wow. It would be like somebody would hit it behind me and I would almost pee my pants. I would be so afraid. And so that my self-esteem was so low because of the trauma. And here's somebody that has that type of low self-esteem, but got into something that was my passion and got into something that I felt like it was my purpose. Like, I believe we all have a purpose on life. Yeah. And I don't know where I got this, but I started really believing in myself because I was doing like 4 interventions a week, flying all over the country. And I was really good at it. And I wasn't intimidated by the wealth of the family. I didn't feel because of, the indigent people and doing interventions with them, I didn't feel, shameful towards them because of, their status. I lived with my aunt in Spanish Harlem for 9 months, in the projects. So I know what it's like to be there, and the wealthy didn't intimidate me. And I just was in my purpose. So I went and I said, Donna Shavu, do you know Donna, the other interventionist on the show?
Yes.
Her and I were out pitching a show because she was doing interventions. I was doing interventions. She used to be an agent in Hollywood. She had all the connections. And everybody's saying it's too dark. Nobody's going to pick up the show. Too dark. No advertisers are going to pick it up. And about a year later, after we tried to sell the show, we found out that Sam Metler sold the show to A&E.
Wow.
And so I called him up out of the blue. I found his cell phone. I mean, that's how you know it, when you believe in a higher power and God running your life. I don't know how do I get the producer, the creator's cell phone number out of, knowing nothing about the industry or who he was. Yeah. And somebody that was working with me at the time, she said I could get his cell phone, and she got it. I called him. I said, "Hey, Sam, I'm really good at what I do. You should interview me." He's like, "Who are you?"
Oh, and that's what it started, yeah? And
that's how it started. And he, he said, "No, I'm looking for a female." And he goes, So I harassed him a few times. And after maybe like 4 calls, he goes, if we get picked up for season 2, I'll call you back. Nice. And so at season 2, I think they interviewed 30 to 40 people on season 2, and I was picked.
Wow. Crazy. God's looking after you there, Ken. Always has been.
Yeah, wow. Right.
Do you think you dealt with all your trauma, Ken?
I don't think you ever deal with all of it. I don't think we ever really, like I teach it. I do trauma eggs 2 days a week for all of our clients at the treatment center. And I think my brain has been, and maybe you could help me with this, Doc, you know, maybe there could be a session here. Let's do a session with Ken. You know, the way I look at it is my brain was, the blueprint of my brain was stamped. And, you know, I learned these survival skins and put all these coat of armors on. And yes, I'm peeling them off as I get older, and I'm dealing with the trauma, and I'm using the trauma as rocket fuel, but it's still blueprinted in my brain. So when I get fearful, or when I get scared, or I get, I go right into, you know, attack. You know, I put back my coat of armor back on. And, you know, I was at a meeting, a 12-step meeting the other day, and a friend of mine, a doctor that, you know, he goes, I put on my boxing gloves, you know, I'm ready to go. And that's automatic pilot. And that's my trauma that I'll have, but having an awareness about it and hopefully changing that, I think, is what recovery is about.
I agree 100%. Yeah. I think knowledge is very powerful of the disease in our industry. I think a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people put the emphasis on the alcohol. You know, I know for a fact with our research that alcohol has got very little to do with alcoholism, the same with drugs. And if you look at it like this, it's all about knowledge. The more you know, the quicker you'll get better, and amazing your life will take off. Has there anything over the years took you near a drink at all, Ken, or a drug?
Well, okay. Well, there's 2 times that has happened. You know, in July, I celebrated 32 years.
Nice.
And 2 times that I got close. And one time I had a major surgery, and they put me on medication, and I did everything that, you know, my doc was very, you know, aware of my addiction, and said, even though you got 28 years sober, 26, whatever it was at that time, he goes, I still want to be very cautious on how I prescribe to you and who's going to be divvying out the medications. And I'm like, I don't like pain medications. I like meth. I like speed.
Exactly.
And he's like, I don't care. You have the gene. I don't, you know. And so I went on the pain medication, and I'm so grateful that number one, I had a family contract still, that if I was to relapse, I go to treatment for 90 days, period. I lose all real properties. I lose my business. I lose everything until I finish 90 days of treatment. And depending on clinical recommendations, if I get any of that back. Because I sat there and I stared at a blank white wall by myself on the pills, and I said, wow, this would be nice to live this way the rest of my life.
Right.
And so that was the first time. And the second time that I came really close was this crazy BS about California sober and sober light. I don't know if we can swear on this, but bullshit, bleep it out. You know, for me,
you can swear. You can swear. Wow.
Okay. That bullshit. And I have 32 years of sobriety, and things have been rough. You know, things get rough in life. And I'm like, I'm in Hawaii. They grow the best weed out here. Maybe I just smoke a little weed and I'll call it, and I'm manipulating it in my brain. I'm saying, you know, I'll call it, you know, what do they call it? Harm reduction. You know, instead of me going crystal meth or other drugs, I'll just smoke a little pot, and I'm kind of getting closer to retirement. So my brain, that's the disease talking, saying, you know, you could do sober light. You could, you know, not go back to your drug of choice. And, you know, there come a time, especially when it was California sober and then went to sober light, you know, I really questioned if I could do that. And it scares me because I have a lot of time and I work in the field, and I see people that relapse and they go back right to their drug of choice, and even worse. And you know, all this stuff. I see it firsthand all the time. And yet my mind still went there. What about the poor people that these people with high platforms and a lot of followers are telling them that that's okay, and they only have 60, 90 days of sobriety, you know, or a few years. So that it just upsets me that that's even out there right now.
Yeah, I mean, my first reaction when I heard about that is how many people have they killed with that you know, line? Because this is my take on that. If you're a real alcoholic or a real drug addict, and you try and follow that sober light, you're going to relapse and you're going to kill yourself. Now, if you're a heavy abuser, or you're you know, a drug addict that was not born that way, then hell yeah, cut back or only use weed. That's fine for you. I wish I could do that. But if you're the real deal, it don't work. And I won't even go near it. I mean, loads of people on the show, what do you think about sober? Like, what do you think? I'm not going near it. It's stupid. You know, it's just going to mess with my head because I listen to shit. I listen to other people, you know. I've just started using brain spotting as a technique, which is going through the pupils into the subconscious brain, and found out, obviously, that what we see is how we feel, and what we hear, we want to become. So I've got to be listening not only to internal dialogue, but I've got to be careful about what I listen to out there. The phrase, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. I love that phrase because I hang around them people. You know, I don't hang around people that are trying to get a different way or different angle on being sober or trying to sneak. You see it all the time. You must have seen it in treatment centers, sneaking the phone in. You're going to relapse. You can't follow the freaking rules. You're trying to run the show yourself again. Yep. You know, follow the rules and get sober. Oh, my friend, you know, sneak some cigarettes in. What the fuck are you doing? You're either in or you're out. You can't be halfway here. And I think that the mix, because anybody drinking too much automatically diagnose themselves as alcoholic, and even though it's the only self-diagnosed illness in the world, that's not 10 DUIs don't make you an alcoholic, you know. But they spread all this myth that, you know, can relapse now and again and everything's okay. It's not okay. When you see people coming out of your treatment centers, Ken, what's the biggest reason for the relapse, you think?
I think it's twofold. I think number one is that the families don't understand their role and understand how to keep consequences into place. So a good example is exactly what you said. We had this young man that was, you know, 7 days in, you know, I get, you know, I just did it for the show. You know, this young man, 7 days in, the dad called, you know, he calls the dad, he sneaks his phone, you know, gets his phone from a staff member saying that, you know, he was approved, gets his phone and calls his dad and, you know, oh, this is horrible. The dad's like, let me come get you. You know, boom, the minute the family folds, the relapse happens.
Yeah.
And so that's the first one. And the second one is that they don't get an understanding, like you said, about their trauma and where it's rooted from. So if we could really get them to unravel their trauma in treatment and give them the tools that they're not a victim to that. Like I just did a trauma egg yesterday, and this guy, 52 years old, and he's still the victim of his stepdad when he was 4 years old. You could see the way he carried his body on when he talked about his stepdad, you know, beating him and giving him welts and all of those things. He's still that victim. So if we could say, okay, you lived that, but now let's look at where you're at in the present. You're doing that to your stepkids.
Yeah.
You're doing that to your stepkids right now, but it's not physical abuse. It's verbal abuse. It's, you know, psychological abuse. He's doing the same exact thing. And now that he has awareness, hopefully we could change it. And keeping his spouse on board with a line in the sand where there's zero, there's no way if he gets back into out drinking again, there's a zero tolerance. Boom. Here's your consequences. So I think if we could do those two things, we'll get a better outcome.
Yeah, I think many times the family kind of think, well, it's not my problem. It's his. If he can only just get well. And the wife's like, well, if he doesn't stop drinking, I'm going to leave. And he's like, all this information and work on the wife. Because the wife always gets on with my psychotherapist who works with the wives. They always get on and go, okay, Kate, let's talk about Johnny. And Kate goes, this isn't about him. This is about you. Why are you putting up with this shit? Why do you keep alienating? What in your past has made you this person, the need and the caretaker for somebody who's going to kill himself? And then they realize, shit, it's not about him. It's about me. And I think when we work on both parties, then they can hold them. Then we have joint sessions with both of them, and then they can hold themselves accountable. Then there's a great chance of recovery. What do you think about when we talk about trauma, Ken? What do you think about inner child work? Do you think that's vital, or do you think that's just another therapy phrase?
Inner childhood?
Inner child work.
Inner child. No, I mean, that's what got me through it. You know, I've been in recovery for many, many, many years, and doing my trauma work and realizing that little boy, you know, Kenny, I mean, they made me get a teddy bear, you know, and call it Kenny. That was my name when I was a little kid. And I took that teddy bear sitting on my dresser here in Hawaii. Wow. And, you know, I treat that little boy that was abused by its peers, and I treat him with dignity and respect and help him realize that nobody could hurt him anymore. So I remember my friend, he was like in his 70s, and he was a colleague of mine that passed up since, but John Southworth, and he would always talk about inner child work. And he would be like, you know, I went to Hawaii and I rented a convertible and I just drove as fast as I can, like that little boy out and play. And I was like, did you take your meds? You're in your 70s, honey. You're not allowed to walk.
Awesome.
And now I'm right there with him. I'm like, I'm going to the beach today after this. Taking that little boy swimming. Oh,
man. These guys that were way before their time. You know, they talk about the guy that owns the Meadows and the teachers there are just part. Never again, they were talking about this like 10, 20 years ago. But it's so true how it's come to fruition of how the inner child real works. I went through the same kind of work myself. And I did some other work there, which was my grandfather, who I was so influenced by, but died before I was born. But they got a mirror, and through the mirror, they dressed this person in my grandfather's clothes and what he used to wear and stuff like that. And it was just like the trauma that was lifted by being able to talk to him, you know, was just amazing. And I think there's lots more to come with the brain and the central nervous system that we can learn that will make treatment easier. Because I would like to see a 95% success rate no matter where we go. And I think it's only a matter of time. At the moment, what we see is those guys that want to recover, it's 100% success rate. Those guys who don't, we don't take on. You have to pass an assessment. You can't buy our services. And once you do that, then we know we have a chance with you, because, you know, it's a killer. I mean, it kills more people. I don't know what you think, but our research shows that alcoholism and addiction kills more people than cancer and heart attacks put together, combined. You know, if somebody sat at home right now, Ken, and they think that a loved one has a problem, or a teenager has a problem, what are the things that the parents can look for in your experience?
Well, I think it's, you know, you want to look for behaviors. Have they changed? Mm-hmm. You know, behaviors, attitudes, attendance. So are they a lot more on edge, you know, with their attitude? You know, is their attendance dropping? Like, are they going to work or going to school, or are they showing up to family events? Their attendance dropping, you know, and they're, you know, the attitude is really big. I mean, you could see this when, as you put it earlier, the spouses, the family members start walking on eggshells. Mm-hmm. My poor mom, I put her through hell. You know, when I was a teenager, I put her through hell. The whole family was walking on eggshells if things didn't go my way. Yeah. And, you know, that's not normal. It's not normal for a family to be walking on eggshells. If you're walking on eggshells, you're way past abuse. You're in addiction. You know, you know, if the phases are recreational use of drugs or alcohol to abuse to addiction, you're past abuse if you're walking on eggshells. You're in addiction. And so if you're walking on eggshells, you need to pick up the phone and call for a professional, call for some support, because it's not going to get better until they change or you change.
Yeah.
And the key component that I want listeners to hear is that they're not going to change because they're numb.
Yes.
They're not going to change. It's going to take you to change. Mm-hmm. And I even asked many, I've been, you know, I talked to thousands of therapists, right? And I asked them, when clients come to you and you ask them, how did they come to you? 90% of them was somebody told me I should come.
Yeah.
90%. It isn't something that comes within yourself to say, oh, gee, things aren't working out. Maybe I should go get a therapist.
Yeah.
That people, right? That doesn't. Somebody in your life tells you, you know, listen, you know, I've been to therapy. This might work for you. And they said 90% have people that ask them to go get help. So it takes that sober person, that coherent person that sees the decline in behaviors and for them to take the action and get them help. If they say no, then you need to go to the next level of getting them help with intervention.
I like that. And if they're not willing to change, then yeah, I remember watching you on the intervention show, and I think you said, I'm sure it was you, in fact it was you, you said, are you willing to change the locks on the door? This was many years ago. You did a show because you were getting to see the parents. How much are you in with this? You know, this guy doesn't want to go, but would you change the locks on the door? And I remember listening to that and thinking, wow, is that the lengths that the family has to go to? And that's when we started studying the family afterwards, and we started studying the family unit as a whole and how much that really plays in to dad who's the alcoholic and how much he's getting away with. And we have a saying here, and it's like, if you're acting out old behavior, guess what? It's not old behavior, it's current behavior. And in that state, you either have to get back to treatment or we're leaving. We actually tell families that if the husband doesn't want to go, leave. Take your kids, protect them, and go to your mom's or wherever until he gets help, because he's never ever going to get any better. And he's never going to wake up one morning and go, hey, I think I want treatment today. I'll step into it, but myself. Never going to happen. If there's no consequences, there's no consequences. You know, what would you? I remember my mom. Things just come back to me now, Ken. It's funny. I've never had this memory before. It's just come back with speaking to you. I remember my mom and dad were poor. They worked for my mom was a cleaner, and my dad was worked for the gas company. Never a lot of money about, but I was in so much of my disease that I needed to drink, and I was going into this horrible mood and shouting. And my mom took the money for tea time, which is dinner time here, and she went to the store and she bought me 2 cans of beer. How desperate did I make them? You know, the stuff. My dad threw me out one night, Ken, 11 o'clock at night, because I was drinking in the bedroom, and he said, it's after my marriage broke up, and he come upstairs and said, you got to go, son. And he took me downstairs. He gave me a little bag with some clothes in, and he gave me £20. And he said, I'm sorry. And he closed the door. I hated that man for years after. I hated him. But when I got clean in the sauna, I went back and I was speaking to my mom because my dad was out. And I said, do you remember that time my dad threw me out and we were laughing? I said, yeah. I said, I've hated that man for that ever since, Mom. I just want you to know that. And this is what she said to me, which thought about the trauma for me. She said, son, in 50 years of being married to your father, that was the only time I've seen him cry. That's the damage we do, that we don't see and we don't want to talk about. And we want to just, you know, squash it over as it didn't happen. And the more we, it's like a scab, take the scab off. You don't have to rip it off, but we need to look and we need to own the damage. And I went back about 2 years ago to see my dad, and I sat him down and made him, oh, it's okay, son. I said, Dad, it's not. Let me just say to you, Dad, I'm sorry, Dad. I'm really sorry for doing all the bad stuff I did for you, making me upset now. And Dad, and that man took that, and a month later, he had a stroke and his memory's gone. So I got my amends right in time, but it's the first time I've seen him kind of humble and stood there and tears in his eyes. And I thought, fuck, how much damage did I do to these guys? Because the doctor told me, he said, Dr. Rob, listen, your mom's died of cancer because of you. I mean, it came, but the pressure, every single night she swore that a policeman would come to the door and told me I was dead. And towards the end of it, when I was on the street, she's like, I hoped you were dead so I could just stop this madness in my head of not thinking. And it's really important that we look at that. Guys, Ken Seeley is on the show. This is Breaking Through Addiction. There's 2 seconds back, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, guys. It's Breaking Through Addiction. My name's Dr. Rob Kelly, the Addiction Doctor, along with my good friend Ken Seeley. Such an amazing man. Ken, when somebody comes up and says that, and I don't know whether you believe in this or not, that alcoholism and addiction is not a disease, what's your answer to them guys?
You know, if they don't believe it's a disease, then I ask them to do their research with the medical community, because, you know, if the medical community is telling me that it is a disease, why do I think I know more? Why do I think I know better? So I always guide them to, you know, go to the AMA, American Medical Association, go and do your research on what the professionals have found. They have years and years and years of research. And what is their determination and diagnoses? What did they come up with? Because I don't have that. I don't have that type of education. I can't provide that. But I'm following what they're saying after the years of research. So if they don't believe it, I'm like, where is your research?
Yeah.
Tell me where your research is that you don't believe it. It's like, if you don't believe cancer is fatal, you know, then where is your research on that? If you don't believe addiction is fatal and a disease, where is your research on that? And I'm totally open. I mean, I want to help as many people as possible. So it's not to be punitive. It's more of, you know, informative. Tell me where that is, and I'd love to do the research on that.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, with our research, you know, we're talking about the biochemical reaction, and we talk about, you know, the predisposition. It's passed down from generations, and the more we learn about it, the more we can explain to people, because it is a disease. And I like people to say, well, it's a dis-ease. Stop it. It's a disease. End of story. It's like having any other disease you can't control in your body. That's been passed down from generation to generation. You don't have a choice. I never had a choice when I was drinking, Ken. I don't know about you. There was no choice towards the end. I stabbed my wife 3 times one night because she wouldn't let me finish my bottle of vodka. That's not me. That's the alcoholic in me. The things we have. If you think I did this to my kids on purpose, the last thing that she said, like I said before, is, Daddy, please stop drinking. You think I could have stopped because of her? Anyone normal person would have said, yeah, but it's the insanity of the disease. And we just, you know, that biochemical reaction that I have. And I always say to people, it's not the alcohol, it's the ethanol. In alcohol, I'm allergic to. I'm not allergic to the alcohol. It's the amount of ethanol that my brain reaction, because of the predisposition and the biochemical structure of my brain, reacts against. So that brings that mental obsession. I got to drink every time. I've got to drink every single time, you know, to get me through this deal. And it's just not true.
And then I love what you just said about that with your kids. You know, and I still was wiping the tears about your story with your dad. That was
thank you.
Oh my God, that was devastating. Yeah. I work with those families that are like your dad, that you've never seen this person cry, and their pain is so intense because of what the addict's doing out on the streets and bringing into the family, and it just rips my heart out. And what you just said, you know, using with your kids, that you would never do that to your kids. And a good interventionist is someone to be able to bring in with empathy, to talk to someone like with your wife and saying, listen, understand that Jerry Moe, I don't know if do you know Jerry Moe from the Betty Ford Center?
Yes.
Yeah, Jerry Moe, you know, started the children's program. He just retired recently at the Betty Ford Center, and from children between the age of 6 and 12, being brought up in a household of a guardian as being an addict, a parent. If the main guardian is an addict or one of the two, then their chemistry of their brain has been shifted to behave, to put on their armor to protect themselves. And so if you're able to express that to your wife, and saying, I know it's really hard for you to kick your husband out. You know, I know it's really hard for you to change the locks, but you have kids at home. They don't have the choice to get up and leave. And if you go and do the research and go talk to Jerry Moe and figure out how your kids are being affected, then you have to kick him out if he's going to drink alcohol under the roof with your kids. It's going to change the chemistry of their brain and create that blueprint of who they become as adults if you don't do it.
Wow, Ken, that blew my mind. Never heard it put like that, but it's so true. And that trauma, that kid there who can't do anything, you know, any person, let's talk about a wife, any wife that puts another man before their children is not worth anything in my book, and vice versa. We have to protect the children around this. You know, my children are still in counseling for what I did. But the cool thing is, I remember getting my kids back after she left with my kids. I got my attorney and I got them back the next day. And this is the madness of the disease, guys. So I got them, ages 1 and 3. I took them into the living room. I sat them down. I put the TV on and I walked into the kitchen. And I'm so happy, Ken. I'm like, oh, I've got my kids back. And the thought hit my mind, wouldn't it be great just to have one beer to celebrate the kids coming back? So I remember opening the beer. 3 days later, when the police kicked the door down and the children hadn't been changed or fed for 2 days, and I was in a stupor, and they took them off me. And my daughter said 3 things, you know, Daddy, Daddy, please don't go. And then she said, Daddy, Daddy, please get better. Then she said, last thing she said to me was, Daddy, Daddy, please stop drinking, which you thought any person could do. So that was my trauma for the last 20, 30 years. And then 2 years ago, she got in contact with me on Facebook. And today, after been many visits over to England, she's my senior manager in my Manchester office in the UK as the therapist there, an LP therapist. So I think if you're struggling at home, or if you think this is it for you, or you think that you can't get out of this, you know, or you've lost everything, there's a way back. You know, things happen when you do the right thing. Now, I'm a God guy. I'm a spiritual God guy, not a religious God guy. But I think that once you do the right thing, then Ken, amazing things start to happen to you. I know they did to me, and it was happening fast as well. The more people I help, the better I feel. Like when I say thank you to somebody, dopamine's released into my brain. I love that. And by just saying, you look nice today, your shoes are amazing, they go and have an amazing day, because there's not enough of this in the world. Communication. You can change somebody's day in a fraction of a second with what you say, and you can ruin somebody's day in a fraction of a second. Once you say it, you can't take it back. I hate them guys that say something, go, yeah, but I'm only joking. No, 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 no. Don't talk to me as a psychologist. Don't talk to me about that. You really meant that, but you're trying to tie it up in a joke, but get your message across. So don't even go there. Ken, so good to have you on the show, man. I mean, just we need to get together or do something together, because you're the only like-minded person that I've met. So when I asked Courtney to reach out, and of course I know you're a busy man, and she says Ken's going to do it, man. My week has been amazing, knowing quite well that I could have a face-to-face with you. It's not even about doing the show. It's just about seeing you. And I want to say a couple of things to you. First of all, thank you. Not for the show, but thank you for who you are. Thank you for the work that you've done and continue to do. And thank you for helping millions of people's lives. You know, I'm just, when your name comes up in conversation, Ken, I'm just in awe of what you've done. And such a humble man, you know, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because you are the #1 in my book and always will be. And your name always comes up, of course, and I always have a bit of a smile. They go, do you know him? Do you know him? Well, kind of. We've never met before, but just a beautiful guy. So you're a beautiful man, Ken. I just love you to bits. And anything you want to leave the watchers and listeners to before we leave?
Yeah, I thank you. Thank you for such an honor to be on your show, and keep up. I mean, you are totally on something, you know, that it really takes the family, you know, it's the board of family instead of the board of medicine, and including them and following them. And that, I think that's the key, is where we're going to get long-term success. So keep up the great work, and it's an honor. And I think we should really start working together, because listening to you is what's been in my brain and been thinking for so many years. And on a side note, when you said, is this it? You know, do you ever get cured from from your trauma? I would love to hear other modalities or other things that you would recommend, because, you know, I still deal with it. You know, I still go into depression. I still go into anxiety. I still go to all of those things. Even though I have an awareness about it, my automatic pilot takes me there. And how do I minimize that? And I'm eager and thirsty to learn anything else that has been working for people to deal with trauma, because I think it's until the day I die, I'm going to be working on this.
I don't think there's a day when me or you will go, well, that's it. We know everything about trauma and addiction. Because I'm intrigued every day that something comes up new that I hear about. I'm on it straight away, like the brain spotting and stuff like that, because I think there's an answer out there, and we keep looking. It's going to be okay. Yeah. Ken Seeley was on the show, guys. What an amazing guy. Ken, thank you once again for being on the show. but we're going to speak real soon because we're going to do something together. Thank you for your time. It's an honor and a pleasure to speak with you. And we'll see you real soon, Ken.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye-bye. Hey guys, welcome back to the back end of the show. My name is Dr. Rob Kelly, the addiction doctor. Jason LaChance was on the show. Unfortunately, we got our times mixed up, which often happens in the show just because of the different time frames people are in. It's crazy. Like Courtney and Janet, they have like 5 or 6, and of course we do England and we do Spain and we do all these time frames is we're going to get it wrong now and again. So apologize to Jason. I'm going to have him back on next week, hopefully, or the week after. So Jason LaChance was on the show. Great guy. Absolutely love this guy, Jason. I think me and Jason are going to do something together as well. Would be foolish not to. And, of course, Ken Seeley was on the show from the show Intervention. But more than that, the amount of people he helps, the TV show, his treatment centers. He does a lot of teaching as well about trauma and interventions. If you want to become an interventionist, Ken's your guy. Call his company up, 911, and 911 interventions. And they will set you on the right path. So thank you for joining us today. Big shout out for Ellie Lawton back over in the UK. Always listens. We always talk when I can. Just so busy at the moment. Ellie, I apologize for not returning every text, but I love you and we're thinking of you. I hope you're still getting our gift every month from you. That's awesome. And other guys that are listening, thank you so much for my sponsor, Rick. Rick's out there, hopefully listening. Thank you for everything you do, Rick. All the people that you've helped, all the sponsees that you've helped, and the work that we continue to do together. I just love it completely. So thank you guys for joining us. Of course, once again, if you've just joined us, let me tell you that Kristen wasn't here today. She had a death in the family. We're all thinking and praying about her. And we spoke this morning briefly, and she wanted to do the show. But I told her to rest, and she took that advice. God bless her. So rest up, Kristen. And I know you're listening to the show or watching the show. We'll see you real soon. We'll see you next week. Guys, if you want to contact myself or Chris, just jump on my Facebook or her Facebook or do a search. You'll see our names. And then contact us, message us, text us, tell me what you want on the show, who you'd like to see on the show. And, hey, we'd like to also interview normal people. So if you're a normal person with a 9-to-5 job that's got a great story, come on. Don't think that you can't come on and tell us. Them stories are usually the best between me and you. So have a great week, guys. And listen, we know that empowered people empower people. We know that. Why don't we have a week going into the weekend? Why don't we have a weekend of complimenting people? Why don't we have a weekend of trying to give $5 to somebody who needs it? Why don't we have one of those weekends? Because many years ago, me and my friend found an old picture of us when we were about 18 and 19. And he said, Rob, look at this picture. And I'm like, oh my God, that's all. Look how thin we were. Look how great, look how good looking we were. Our skin, oh God, those were the days. I remember thinking, at the time, we didn't know those were the days. We had no idea those were the days. What if tomorrow's one of those days and Sunday? So when we act as if it's one of those days, enjoy ourselves, enjoy the freedom, enjoy each other, and enjoy peace. We'll see you next time on the show, guys. From me and Chris, we'll see you next time. Goodbye.